Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, tire siping, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll cover all the home teams. Saints, LSU, Tulane, all are in camp now. Saints had their first 3 days of padded practices off today. And of course, we'll get into it all. Have great guests for you today. Both from CressidySports.com. Crissy Froyd on her first journey here on the program. And of course, Rene Nadeau, again, a frequent guest on our program. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming down. We'll start off with Crissy. Crissy, welcome. If you would, tell the audience a little bit about yourself. First time on our program. I know you do a lot with quarterbacks. You're with CressidySports.com, but you're on with a lot of other publications as well.
Yeah, I'm currently with Sports Illustrated of the Fan Nation Network on Sports Illustrated covering Mississippi State and the NFL Draft, and then USA Today Sports Media Group covering the Saints and then the NFL Draft and quarterbacks there, and then College Football Network. I'm covering the AAC over there and then also the quarterbacks of the AAC over there. So quite a bit going on as usual. It's kind of been that way for a while. Yeah,
and a graduate of LSU, right?
Yes, I graduated in 2020.
2020, and you're living here now from Houston?
Yeah, well, I lived in Houston, then I went to LSU, and then I went over with Mike Leach at Mississippi State for a while, and then after, that was my mentor, and then after his death came back over here, so yeah.
There you go. Well, welcome to the show.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming down. Rene, welcome back, my friend. Always good to see you. Tell us a little bit about Cressida Sports, everything you got going on over there, and some other things you're involved in.
Yeah, I wish I could say I graduated from LSU in 2020, but I think I'd be stretching the truth a little bit.
When did you graduate from LSU, by the way?
It was
a while back.
It was back. It was a wagon train.
Yeah.
But anyway, worked for CBS and WFN Radio for Saints games and a lot of other events here. Maybe doing some college football for ESPN, color analyst. I'm not doing as many as I used to, and that's okay now. Right. But and I work with Crescent City Sports and cover a variety of things, recruiting, college football, Saints, whatever it may be, and still keep pretty busy.
Now, what you got coming up for us in Crescent City?
Tell you what, I got, I don't know when we're going to run it, but every year at this time, I do all the players who played, who prepped in New Orleans area, who are in the NFL rosters, and how many guys from the state. There are 39 guys who played prep football, high school football in this greater New Orleans area who are on NFL rosters right now. Right. I'll give you the names, that background. And there's about 113 in the state, Pelican State, who are playing in the NFL right now.
Chris, anything you want to go ahead and hype, let folks know what they can look for?
Yeah, well, we're releasing all the conference quarterback rankings. I'm sitting on about, like 20 quarterback interviews. We're still releasing a lot more, both during and ahead of the season. So I'm really excited about that. And since there's 140 of them, and then plus all the FCS guys and the backups, it never really does stop.
Right, and where can folks find that?
Sports Illustrated, Crescent City Sports for the Tulane guys, and then USA Today Sports Media Group and College Football Network.
Let's get into it. Saints again. Really, the first 3 padded practice where we got really a chance to really kind of see what kind of football team this is going to be. When you look at this team and you look and you compare and contrast from last camp to this camp, and Rene, I'll take you first on this. What's the biggest difference you've seen?
This year to last year?
Yes.
Dennis Allen is a lot more comfortable. He's got a few more pieces in this, than I think he had last year. You got one defensive coordinator, Joe Woods, not the duel last year. You got guys that are, Chris Olave going into his second year. Some guys who you're counting on have a little more experience, but there's a lot of you don't know what's going to happen. A lot of what ifs and things like that. A lot of unknowns with this team, and it's a team that could win 8 games. It's a team that could possibly win 11 or 12, right. But injuries could certainly dictate how good they can be, because in some areas, defensive line, offensive line, even wide receiver, there's not a lot of depth. And you notice a lot of offensive linemen are coming in, not starters, but they're bringing in a lot of offensive linemen. When a guy is cut from the secondary, an offensive lineman is brought in. And I just think that they were a little concerned about the depth, and things happen. Andres Pete went down with an injury. You don't know how long he's going to be out. But there's a lot of unknowns. And if Mario Davis or Pete Werner went down at linebacker, and things like that. So a lot of unknowns right now.
Crissy, we'll talk about up front, but it starts with the quarterback, Derek Carr coming in. Talk about him as a quarterback, what he has done in his career, and again, him kind of taking the leadership role here in New Orleans and really kind of acclimating himself pretty quickly to the system, and kind of being, I don't want to say Breeze-like, but again, coming in and reminding us a lot of Breeze about what he has said. Now, what he does on the field, we'll see, but break him down for us.
Yeah, I think the first thing he obviously brings to the table is a high level of experience. This is a veteran quarterback, which is important to have on any roster, regardless of whether it's your starter or backup, and we see both across the league, and this is the first team that he's been with outside of the Raiders. And so there's kind of this argument that maybe with a change of scenery, he hits a little bit of a higher ceiling here, that maybe he can be the bridge before the Saints kind of find the quarterback of the future, since I believe he's entering toward the end of the back half of his career. But one thing that I think about is the touchdown to interception ratio has never truly been good. I mean, it's been a while since we've seen him hit well in that statistical category. And then we also think about that seems to stay the same regardless of whether he has a high level of talent around him or not. So that's an area that he's going to need to flip the script in. But I do think it also helps, too, that he has a relationship with Jake Haener. They're both from Fresno State. Right. And I think that's still yet a very underrated quarterback. And I think that people started to realize that enough, and that he went higher than he was originally projected to go in the draft, and rightfully so. But I think that he's still got more in the tank than just being a competent backup.
Right. Well, he's been a lot of talk of camp, Haener. When you start looking at, a lot of people didn't think much of him coming in. Jameis Winston's the backup, obviously, on a one-year deal. But from everybody that I've spoken to that's been out there, Haener's turned some heads.
He has, and I always liked him. Watching him yesterday at practice with Mike Detillier and Bobby Hebert, and we just kind of sharing ideas and everything. And too many people made way too much about his height and everything, way too much. I mean, first of all, he was injured last year and wasn't as mobile as he could be. He moves around very well, makes some nice throws, he throws some accuracy. And I think as he gets some experience in exhibition season, which he will get, I think you'll see how good he can be. Now, he's going to get better with experience, but Jake Haener can certainly be a lot better than people anticipated when he first came in, and they made way too much about his size factor.
I remember our draft show, you were talking about Jake Haener before the draft as well. What do you like about him?
I think it comes down to his high level of accuracy at all levels of the field, and his ability to throw into, it just looks like impossibly tight windows. And I talked to Jake and worked with him for about 2 years before he declared for the draft, and I think We were on a call one time, and I had talked to some scouts, and they had said some things about the height, and Jake had named off like must have been 20 different quarterbacks that were his same height that had success at the NFL level. So I think just that, and then the level of mental processing, the football IQ, and just the level of maturity and leadership too. I mean, I always told people whenever I first started working with him that I felt like he was like 22 going on 40. So I think he brings a really strong vocal leader, and I mean just blew everyone away at the Senior Bowl. The quarterback competition there was not even close.
Right.
And if I could just jump on that real quick, talking to Bobby yesterday, and he said, I've talked to him a few times, and you know, he seemed like he impressed Bobby with the conversations they've had, what he knows. And I don't know, I wasn't there when Bobby was asking him questions and all, but just his take on it was he was impressed the way he, like she said, the way he processes things, and he's a lot more. He adjusts really quickly, a lot quicker than people thought, and he knows his limitations. He makes up for it in what he can do.
Well, one thing about this team, again, they've had years of having a smaller quarterback and know how to build an offensive line around that type of quarterback to protect him. Now we'll see again how this plays out. Mention the offensive line. Crissy, I want to go to you here. This has been kind of a revolving door for them so far. Trey Turner goes out with, again, the torn quad. He was going to push for a starting position. Then you have Pete that comes out with a strained quad on Monday. They've moved James Hurst to into the left guard position now. The hope is that Trevor Penning is going to be able to handle that left tackle position. We'll see if Pete is going to be able to come back. They draft Saliveri. You know, they bring in multiple players to try to chip out and have some depth there. Your thoughts on the offensive line as it stands now, and do you concur with Rene that they may again have to bring in some other players for quality depth?
Yeah, and I think they've already started to do that. And when we look at Nick Saldiveri, I mean, this is a player that they're already talking about could push for a starting position early. Whether or not that ends up happening will be something to see, but I think that the injury issue, like you mentioned, the revolving door has definitely been something, and depending on how healthy these players stay, could continue to be a trend that the Saints are obviously going to hope to stop.
Yeah, now they brought in Max Garcia, who could play multiple positions for them. That's been kind of James Hurst's forte for them. He's kind of, been the Clemente recently. He is really a really good player. I like him on the inside better than the outside, but you'd rather have him in a position where if you can have a solid starting guard, that he's a guy that can come in and play multiple positions if there's an injury. If not, I'd like to see him at left guard. Your thoughts on James Hurst and where you think he's ultimately going to land?
James Hurst, yeah, he's a very intelligent guy, and he's. You can plug him in anywhere, and he was speaking very highly of Penning. But again, this is basically Penning's rookie season. Right. I mean, he had a lot of mental reps last year, but this is his rookie season. He's right now next to him and at left guard, and Max Garcia, as you mentioned, that could be a good find for them. He's a center guard kind of guy. And he's a guy that if something happened to Eric McCoy temporarily or otherwise, Max Garcia can come in and take that. I like the Saliveri guy a lot. I've spoken with him a couple of times. Very intelligent guy. It's a shame that this minor injury thing kind of bit him early, but they like him a lot. He can play even center in the mix. I mean, he's done a lot of things, and he's an adjustable kind of guy, Old Dominion kind of guy. And I think Saliveri's got the size. He could play tackle or guard or even inside center if need be, if they had worked him at that. But he's a guy that Clemente kind of guy. He could play a lot of positions. And Ryan Remchak, they've given him a lot of veteran days off, a lot.
Yeah.
So they know what he can do.
Right.
They want to make sure that he doesn't take the pounding too much. It'll pay dividends down the road. That you give him a day off here and there during the season when they really need him. That's when it'll pay dividends.
Yeah. Trevor Penning, a mauler, big, huge. You love his measurables. The question for him is, does he have the feet to play left tackle? Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's something that's just going to end up having to develop. I think that footwork is an important part of any position, and whether or not he can clean that up is going to determine where he's going to play. And I think that really for the Saints with the offensive line, that moving forward just generally, that versatility is going to be so key, because we mentioned earlier the revolving door, kind of having players to maybe try different positions to kind of add to that switch up.
Right. Let's talk defense. Let's talk defensive line now again. They bring in Saunders, they bring in Shepard, they draft Brzee, they draft Foskey. We've been hearing really good things about Peyton Turner, again, who has been healthy during this camp. Obviously, Granderson, again, he's every year he's gotten better. Cam Jordan is a mainstay. I still believe they need help on the interior of the defensive line, and again, depending on what happens at that defensive end position opposite Cam Jordan, maybe going out and getting a veteran there. Your thoughts on again, the defensive line as it stands today, and if they do need to add personnel before the end of camp?
Right now, Peyton Turner has turned it up a notch, and he's having a good camp. And Grandison, I think if Grandison and Peyton Turner can man that spot, you'll be okay there.
Okay.
I think between the two of them, they'll offset somewhat Cam Jordan, if you will. With Shepard and Saunders coming in, it was a wash from what they lost and what they got. Shy Tuttle and Davenport. Anyamata, I'm sorry, thank you. And you get Malcolm Roach in here. Crissy right now is a situational guy.
Okay.
He's more of a pass rush guy than he is a run stopper. It's going to take a little while for that learning curve. He's got a little ways to go in that. He's not a lineup first string kind of guy right now. Crissy is not there. Okay. I'm a little, I agree with you that I would be a little concerned with the interior if either Saunders or Roach or Shepard were to go down. Shepard's a starting guy right now. Yeah. Boy, you're very weak there. And you don't have a playmaker there. Right. I mean, they're hoping that Crissy becomes that guy.
Yes.
But you don't have that playmaker guy, I mean, like a Leroy Glover or whatever it may be, who can make a difference on the inside. But Foskey is going through the learning curve right now. I don't say he's a one-trick pony, but he's still got some things to learn going from college to the NFL. He's a stud and athletic kind of guy, but he's still going to have some things to learn because I think some of the moves that maybe worked at Notre Dame are not working in the NFL, and it's going to take a little while to adjust.
Right. What's your take on the defensive line? They have $13 million to spend. They have not really. They brought in Trey Turner. They brought in Jimmy Graham, which we'll get into in a few minutes. But they haven't really looked at again, bringing in, I don't want to say high price, but maybe one of the top veterans that are out there right now, still waiting before camp ends. What are your thoughts about the defensive line?
I think it's kind of like how he said. It comes more down to an issue of seeing whether or not these two guys will pan out for the long term moving forward. And then regardless, though, I think that the depth issue at any position and then within the interior here is something that's eventually going to have to be addressed. And I think that camp will kind of tell the story of how they need to do that. But I think when we talk about the defensive line as a whole, depending on how things are looking as camp moves forward, that having kind of a key name veteran guy may be the way to go here. And I think that works on both sides of the ball.
I think the tight end position is probably one of the strongest positions on the team. They add Jimmy Graham. It makes it even stronger. Jimmy Graham so far has looked pretty good in camp, what we understand. What do you believe his role is going to be with this team?
I think it's going to be a strong one, and I think when we look at the tight end position, another player that I'm really intrigued to watch is Foster Moreau. I don't think he ever got enough credit at LSU, and I know that we talked about the two-headed snake at wide receiver, Joe Burrow, all of those guys, but I think that he was quietly productive and was really an integral piece of that offense. So obviously coming back from just the health issues and everything, I think it's going to be interesting to watch the way that he can work his way up within what seems to be a very stacked room that they have there.
What are your thoughts on Jimmy Graham, the room as a whole, how they utilize Graham in the season?
Well, he was out last year, and the older you get, you can't be Father Time. He won't be in a starting role, but they'll have a package for Jimmy Graham.
Red zone?
Yeah, he'll be a red zone kind of guy. He's never been the best blocker in the world. Right. But they're going to look for matchups with him, with his size. He still has a good catching radius. He's still done a good job as a receiver. Jawan Johnson has stepped up. He's a little better than he was last year. Foster, not only, and I think this is important, not only has he been a good tight end in college and pros, but remember that he wore jersey number 18. He is well respected in the locker room. He's that kind of guy. And he gives it everything he's got. He'll be when I say a role player, anything they need him to do, he can do. He can be a blocker. He can be a good receiver in a short zone kind of thing. He's got that relationship with Derek Carr. That's going to mean a lot too. And I talked to Brian Anderson yesterday, a wide receiver who came over, who spent some time with Derek Carr. That relationship, Foster Moreau, that's going to mean a whole lot because Derek Carr knows what these guys can do.
Yeah. That's going to be a tough cut. I mean, you look at, again, from Johnson to Morrow, you have Jesse James you brought in, you got Crow you had on the practice squad last year, and of course you bring in Jimmy Graham now. That's going to be a tough cut. They normally carry 3. Would they carry 4? Is Jimmy Graham a luxury?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that whenever he kind of talked about Father Time and all of that, and having like the red zone package that we could maybe expect to see kind of just as time goes on to kind of go more that route.
Right, right. And I got to believe, and I'll talk about this on the show last week. We talked about it on the radio show over the last couple of weeks since Jimmy Graham has signed. Their red zone offense with the weapons that they have between Taysom and Kamara. You talk about Miller, what he did at TCU, Williams, what he did at Detroit, Michael Thomas, what he did when he was healthy. Now you throw in Jimmy Graham, Juwan Johnson, what he did, Foster Moreau. They got a lot of options right there when it comes to the red zone.
Yeah, and I think that they're pretty loaded up on pass catchers, and I think the other thing to watch too is going to be Derek Carr's red zone accuracy and how he does there. And then really I think they put Derek Carr in a position, even in year one with the team, I mean it's an adjustment, but there's almost no excuse really when you think about it.
Right. A lot of fourth quarter comebacks in the history of Derek Carr's career.
Yeah, I mean, that is something that he has up his sleeve, but I think overall that he still has a lot. Now, I wouldn't say a lot to prove as a quarterback because he is a veteran, but I kind of think that we've seen where the ceiling is, but it's a question of, is he going to be competent enough for the Saints even just in the short term?
Wide receiver position, your thoughts? Michael Thomas, obviously the big key here. You got Shaheed, you got Olave, and then you got a bunch of guys that are kind of jockeying for position here. What are your thoughts on the starters and then the possible depth there?
You know, I'm going to tell you, the guy that people in New Orleans can't figure out, and he's been having a good camp, is Traquan.
Right.
You know, it's crazy. He had a good day yesterday. He's been having good days at camp every day. I hate to be negative about it because Chris Olave has stepped up, and he's better than he was last year. And Rashid Shaheed, the defensive backs you talk to, they rave about him. But then, you're talking about, be honest about it, Rashid Shaheed was an undrafted free agent, okay? And he's a guy they're heavily counting on right now. Chris Olave is in his second season. Most of the time on most teams, both of those guys would have a mentor to kind of, and Michael Thomas could be that guy. But I mean, they play, you know, they don't have as big as a role as they both do. Rashid Shaheed is a guy they really count on with the deep speed, and Chris Olave is a guy too, but Rashid Shaheed is that deep guy. Brian Anderson is a guy I talked to yesterday. Again, he's a guy that played 2 years with the Raiders and he was with the Falcons last year, and he's a big receiver. And he's an all-time leading receiver in South Carolina, 6'3", 215. How good he can be, I don't think he can be a starting guy, but he can be a role player. And when the exhibition season comes and Brian feels like he's got a lot to prove, even though he's a 4-year veteran, and he could be a good find for them. Traquan Smith, I don't know how good he can be. Can that carry over from camp? You know, he's never really done it. Can that be a position that Kurt Merritt is a guy they training at wide receiver and at running back, and they like his speed and his athleticism, and he's a guy that can play both of those. So that's a guy you got to really look at. If he shows anything in training camp, you got to look at him as a possible stick because he's a guy who can play dual roles.
And he played special teams in the course,
yes,
which is a big part. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the wide receiver position? Is it set? Are they going to have to add players down the line here?
I think that, like I said earlier, they have a lot of good options at pass catcher, not a lot of guys who are super established as far as depth goes. So I think that perhaps we could see just kind of how things shake out if they do need to add someone there.
Andrew Dowell gets injured yesterday, knee injury. He's on injury reserve now. Again, that may be good news for a guy like Nick Anderson, who's trying to make this team on special teams. But now that hurts the depth at linebacker. Zach Bond has kind of moved into that pass rushing role that we really thought he should have been playing since he came out of Wisconsin. But that said, there's a lot. You got Jackson, the draft trip pick from last year.
DeMarco Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, but again, not a lot of let me say veteran depth.
Boy, I say there's a lot of suspects there.
Right.
And where Dowell got hurt, he was like right down the field from where we were, and it was a simple. They were going out of bounds, and somebody rolled up on him or something. It was just the play was basically over. It's a shame.
Yeah.
And he was in the wrong place, wrong time. Nick Anderson, you got to pull for him. He looks like he's got a great opportunity in special teams. He relishes that opportunity.
Right.
I think that's where he's going to make his bones. I can see him, and I was telling a couple of media guys yesterday talking that I can see Nick Anderson, and I hope I'm wrong. I can see Nick Anderson maybe going on the practice squad, but within 4 or 5 games he'll be on the special teams, and he could be a guy that can make his mark there. I mean, JT Gray is a guy who's been a special teamer and he's got a defensive secondary, and Nick Anderson can play at linebacker. Right. It's going to take him a while to learn the nuances of the NFL. But he knows, and we've talked enough where special teams is going to be his baby, and he loved doing that at Tulane, and Willie Fritz put him in a position. He played all special teams, and he really liked it, and he's got a great attitude, and he'll do anything he has to do, and I think he has enough skill to make that team.
Yeah, and the reason why I mentioned is Dow's been a kind of a special teams phenom. They're going to have to replace that. That's something Nick Anderson did at Tulane. Maybe that's a guy that slips in. Maybe it's somebody else that does that. Your thoughts on the linebacking core?
Yeah, I think whenever we talk about Nick Anderson, that's a guy that I spent a lot of time around at Tulane, and the height thing he was kind of knocked for, but that never really stopped him from finishing atop the stat sheet multiple times. Now, like we mentioned earlier, the NFL is a little bit different, learning the nuances and everything, so I could see him taking that path, or maybe he does end up on the practice squad to begin with, but works his way up. But I think he's better than a practice squad player and better than someone who's going to stay on special teams full time, and just he's always had a chip on his shoulder. He's always been underrated, and I think that'll be proven here. And he's also talked to me about how his height, being a shorter player at that position, does help him be a little bit more elusive in some ways. He kind of went into that in detail in one of our interviews, so I think that he kind of knows his strengths and his weaknesses and how to play to his advantage.
Sam Mills made a career out of that, didn't he?
Well, Sam Mills, he did things, though, I'm going to tell you what, and I'll tell you a quick story. I remember talking to Jim Everett, and before he came to the Saints, and he said, I met him when he first got in New Orleans, and Jim Everett said, first thing I want to do, I want to talk to Sam Mills. The Rams were playing the Saints, and Jim Everett checks off into a play, and Sam Mills says, they're coming right through right tackle, they're coming right here. And Jim Everett steps back, checks off. Now the play clock's going too. And he says, he calls the play and they're going wide. Sam Mills says, they're going wide left. Jim Everett looks at the clock, calls timeout. It's like, what did he see that knew was exactly, I mean, did an offensive lineman flinch or whatever? And it goes to show you that he was so special because he made up for his lack of height. He just watched little things. And Nick Anderson is a guy who will watch the little things, and he knows that I'm limited. Maybe I may not be the fastest or whatever, but Sam was a special guy. If he'd have been 6'8", he was so smart that he picked up little things.
Yeah, when you saw Nick Anderson wearing the Sam Mills jersey, right? Again, kind of just letting everybody know, hey, I can play this game. I do think linebackers are a place where they're going to have to do some backstop with a veteran. We'll see again how that plays out going forward. Expectations for this team this year?
I think it's very obvious that this team went playoffs or bust, and with the goal of obviously making it to the big game. It's going to take a lot of things panning out, I think, and a lot of question marks to be answered. But I think that if Derek Carr performs well, I think that if the pass catchers develop into what we think that they can be, they fix and figure out some things in the offensive line and the defensive line, this could be a team that makes a big run and completely flips the narrative from last year.
Rene?
You know, injuries are going to happen, and you don't know when and who it's going to happen to. And I would say right now, pretty much a 10-win season looks pretty realistic. For them to win more than that, something would have to happen. What I mean by that is everybody have to stay healthy. The teams they're playing may have to have some issues, stuff like that. I mean, to go in and say that they're going to beat the Falcons twice and Carolina twice, and you don't know that. Okay, that's why they play. But I'd say right now, 10 wins is something that's pretty safe. 11 to 12, again, you need some help.
Right. Alvin Kamara met with the commissioner yesterday. There's no word on, again, what his suspension will be. Most people think it will be somewhere between 2 and 6 games. Again, hopefully, that will be something we will find out very soon, and that will happen at the beginning of the season, so this doesn't linger on. Good move on Kamara going to see the commissioner yesterday?
Yeah, I think so, especially given the situation, just the circumstances he's been under this offseason.
Only move.
Huh?
Only move.
Only move to make?
Only move to make.
Yeah.
You know, it was one way, you had to go this way or else.
Right, there you go. All right, we're going to take a break here. Crissy Froyd and also Froyd, of CressySports.com. Rene, Nadeau of CressySports.com are our guest. I'm your host, Eric Asher. When we come back, we'll talk LSU Tulane. We're going to try to get into conference realignment if we have some time here. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned. Sorry about that.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Acadian Custom Shutters is locally owned and operated, specializing in interior and exterior shutters and window coverings, as well as awnings and patio covers. Acadian Custom Shutters offers American products with personal service and workmanship, serving the South Shore, North Shore, and Mississippi Gulf Coast. More information is available at 985-893-3119 or acadiancustomshutters.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Crissy, Froyd, and also Rene, Nadeau, CrissySports.com are our guests. Talk some LSU now. They started fall camp today. A lot of expectations for the Tigers. Again, the media voted them second in the West. But again, most people believe they're going to overtake Alabama this year. Georgia's still the juggernaut in the SEC, expected to be a team that vies for a national championship in year 2 of Brian Kelly. It starts with the quarterback. We got Crissy here today. That is her forte. Break down Jayden Daniels for us.
Yeah, Jayden Daniels is a quarterback that whenever I first saw him over at Arizona State, I kind of questioned, I was like, is this a guy who is able to score through the air consistently? And that was the big question with his stat line and everything, is was it Arizona State's offense or was it Jayden Daniels and his shortcomings? And I think whenever we first saw him at LSU, the question kind of still lingered, and I was like, okay, he's having trouble as a passer. But then that changed, and now this is a quarterback through transferring that is very good on the ground, and then he's also very good through the air. I think that there are some things to clean up still from a passing perspective, and I think that whenever we talk about the transition to the NFL and all of that as well, it's not necessarily about mobility anymore as it is improvisation. So I think the key thing to look at here is how well he's using his improvisation, because I mean, we watch these guys run around the line of scrimmage like Houdini all the time in college, but that doesn't always work in the NFL. And I think that some analysts have a really hard time of separating, okay, who's mobile and who has that improvisation that the NFL is looking for. So I think there are some things that need to be tweaked from that perspective, but I think he has grown leaps and bounds from Arizona State. Jayden Daniels was hardly on the national radar for the better part of his time at Arizona State, but I think that he's a quarterback with a high ceiling, and it's just going to be interesting to see. This is going to go one of two ways, I think, from the NFL scout perspective.
How about Nussmeier as the backup and maybe possibly getting some time?
Yeah, I've told Garrett Nussmeier to his face before that I think he has the highest ceiling in the LSU quarterback room and has since he arrived. I think really special player who does things well off script, good arm. I think that especially through his early time, he showed some signs for development as far as decision making goes that are very glaring. But I think as far as the raw talent that he brings to the table, I think this is a quarterback that can make plays out of structure very well, and then it can also develop into a very good passer. I'm really excited to see what he continues to do.
How do you think they utilize him this year? Is it just going to be in kind of the games where there's blowouts? Do you think you'll get some quality time? Obviously, again, Jayden Daniels is a Heisman Trophy candidate. How do you pull that guy off the field? But what about Nussmeier? I mean, he came back, and a lot of people thought he might have transferred.
Yeah, I think that if he would have transferred, he would have had starting opportunities at some very highly touted schools on the same level as LSU. I think that's just a testament to what Brian Kelly's doing over there. But I think I wouldn't go so far as to say rotating quarterback system. That's not going to happen with the Jayden Daniels, but I think some packages for him for sure. And then if for any reason, there's no reason to believe that right now, that Jayden Daniels begins to falter, I think you have a number 2 quarterback who is very reliable. And then if for any reason that there's ever an injury, I think you have someone you feel very confident about going into the season with.
No doubt about it. It starts up front on both offensive and defensive lines. Break those down for us.
They have more depth than last year, and last year at this time, you didn't know who was going to, you had a lot of guys coming in and everything, and who would have thought Will Campbell and Emory Jones would have the seasons they had. But you got, you got Charles Turner at center. You got Miles Frazier at left guard. Right guard, you got Garrett Dellinger right now. You pencil him in. But watch Mason Lunsford. He's the guy came in from Maryland. He's got more starts than anybody on the defensive line. He's got 26 starts. Miles Frazier's got 25 if you include Florida International and LSU. So Mason Lunsford did not transfer from Maryland with 26 starts to sit and watch. He's figuring he's a right guard. So he's going to really focus on that position. It'll be a competition with him and Garrett Dellinger. Lance Hurd is a young man coming in. Who would have thought a true freshman would come in and compete? But after Will Campbell and Emory Jones, you never know anymore. Marlon Martinez is a guy who's a much bigger. He's 330, much bigger than Charles Turner. He could play center or guard. He's going to be vying for a spot somewhere, and he's a senior. This is his last go around. So, you know, the offensive line is going to be a lot, I think will be better experience. You got everybody basically coming back. And I think it'll be a whole lot better. Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier will know what he's got there. The defensive line, Mason Smith coming back is going to mean a whole lot. Huge. I mean, that's, and Makai Wingo, I mean, he stepped up and really was very little drop off from what you thought Mason Smith would do. Yeah. Makai Wingo was an all SEC kind of guy. And you know, Savion Jones, Ovuku, the guy came in from Texas. They man the outside spots right now. Deshaun Womack, he's a true freshman. Watch him. He's another guy that you may not see a lot early on, but as he starts to figure it out, Deshaun Womack, number 17, boy, he can be really, really special. And he's an outside rush guy. He can play that jack position. Defensive line, I think, it's got a lot of guys that they have enough depth, they have enough experience, and they brought in Paris Shan and Justin Jefferson from West Virginia. They have a lot of guys with experience. And if there's, you know, if they run packages and rotate, there's not going to be a lot of drop off.
Right. Linebacker, secondary seems pretty strong with safety. Linebacker seems to be pretty strong as well. Cornerback, a question mark with the transfers. Your thoughts on the rest of the defense?
Hal Perkins. I mean, they move in the middle.
Is he going to play middle linebacker? Yes. Do you think they're going to keep him there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you got Penn. And I'm drawing a blank. Omar Speeds from Oregon State. Right. Yeah, wow, that's a great ad. He is a tackling machine. You got Greg Penn coming in. You got Wes Weeks coming in. You know, you got enough people at linebacker. There's enough skill there and enough athleticism. And Hal Perkins just makes that whole position, lifts that whole position up. And he's a butt-kiss kind of guy for sure. The secondary, you got a lot of transfers in. Deuce Chestnut from Syracuse, and you got Denver Harris from Texas A&M. A freshman that they are trying to find a spot for is Javian Torbiano. He's a 5-star guy. He's a 6'1", 200-pound guy. They're trying to give him a look at slot, trying to give him a look at cornerback, at safety. They are trying to find a spot for him. And you got Major Burns coming back. He'll be healthy this year. That'll mean a whole lot. And Greg Brooks, I mean, my gosh, you know, he saw it all last year. You got a lot of depth, a lot of experience. It's just a matter of playing together and knowing what each one of them do in the chemistry. But as far as the skill and athleticism and our defense, you certainly have it. And LSU has been renowned for having great defenses that win games, and they have that kind of skill. And they have the skill position players on offense as well. Oh yeah. I mean, they're stacked at wide receiver, and they finally have, again, a lot of backs that come to the table with a different skill set. Well, and Logan Diggs is the guy that you got to look at first, that he's going to get, a freshman that I like, and I think he's going to be a guy to keep an eye on as if he figures it out as Caleb Jackson. He's a kid from Baton Rouge, and I think he's 6 foot 225. He's the fastest running back they have right now. He runs at 10.6, 600 meters. He's going to have to figure it out. He wasn't there for spring. But Josh Williams is a walk-on guy. He's got a scholarship now. He does everything. He's just a guy that, you know, he's got to get. Noah Kane, 10 touchdowns last year. John Emery Jr., what is he going to do? Is his academics behind him? If he steps up, John Emery, that makes that position a whole lot better. It's now or never, right now. It's now or never. And so, yes. And so, John Emery, this is his time. Crissy, let's talk about quarterbacks. First, let's take the SEC. A lot of people believe Jaden Daniels is one of the top of the class in the SEC, but
How good are the quarterbacks in the SEC this year?
I honestly think that this is going to be a little bit of a weaker class in comparison to what we've seen, and we're so used to the Alabama quarterback being in the top 3 and usually the number 1. And at this point, we don't even know who the starting Alabama quarterback is going to be for sure at this point. And it is the weakest quarterback room that I've seen out of Alabama to this extent. But I mean, you've got some interesting names. One of the most intriguing, I'm not saying that he's the best or even top 3, Devin Leary at Kentucky taking over for Will Levis. This is a quarterback who got a lot of hype at NC State, that did a lot of really good things. We remember that back and forth game against UNC, that very nitty-gritty in-state rivalry battle where he came in clutch in the final seconds of the game, and it was just really, those last few drives are ones to watch. I think he brings a lot to the table as a quarterback, but we think about injuries, and there's so many quarterbacks that are good that fall off the radar, and JT Daniels is not the perfect example of this, but I talked to him the other day and I was like, do you ever think about if you had been healthy this entire time at Georgia, that this Heisman narrative might still be going on? I think it's important. It sounds simple, but we can't forget about the fact that just because these quarterbacks have gotten injured, now there's times whenever they don't come back the same, they still have the same skill set and they're still the same player. So I think Devin Leary has a huge opportunity to show what he was at NC State against higher level competition and become once again a top 10 quarterback in the nation. I've heard some things about Carson Beck being more highly rated by scouts at Georgia than the national attention he's getting, so I think that's going to be really interesting to watch. And then over at Mississippi State, Will Rogers is the starter right now. They bring in Michael Wright from Vanderbilt. Very fast quarterback. That guy has some wheels. I think he's going to be interesting to watch, but then also Will Rogers being one of the last of the air raid quarterbacks, put up some good numbers. It has developed. I think he's still got some decision-making issues to continue to improve on, and it's late for a veteran. So this is going to be a statement season for him and Zach Arnett's offense.
How about nationwide?
As far as I would say, whenever we're looking at top quarterbacks, I think that Michael Pratt deserves to be in the top 10.
I agree with that.
I think that Caleb Williams, obviously, I mean, that guy does some crazy things from the pocket that comes down just to mental processing and how good he is from the pocket. We haven't seen a quarterback who is first and foremost, I feel like, renowned mostly for the pocket at number 1 in a long time, because Caleb Williams, he's mobile enough, but I mean, that's not his top trait. So I think those guys are definitely going to be ones to watch. And then Austin Reed over Western Kentucky, that's kind of a Bailey Zappi type of prospect. The NFL is really high on them, that I do know. So I think that the way that he develops this season could be big. He's also another Heisman Trophy guy to watch.
You've been covering Tulane, so let's start with Tulane now. Michael Pratt, it starts with Michael Pratt, but again, the transfer portal's been good to them. They have another great recruiting class. They look like the class of the American Athletic Conference right now. University of Texas San Antonio again coming in. They're going to be a formidable opponent. But your thoughts on the wave, and it starts with Michael Pratt.
Yeah, I think so. I think that he's last year, whenever I did the quarterback rankings, I had him in my top 15, and everyone else had him, I want to say, like bottom 50, some people as low as number 120 in the FBS. But it comes down to the way that the offensive line improved. So we were able to see who Michael Pratt was whenever he wasn't injured every other second of the day.
Right.
Basically was the issue. I think another guy that has a high level of mental processing, I think that his decision making has gotten better. I think he needs to learn to slide a little bit more, but he is running less recklessly, but just really tough, gritty quarterback, makes smart decisions. I think he's going to continue to progress this year and is going to be someone who, I mean, I've heard from some NFL scouts that they have him right behind Caleb Williams and Drake May.
Really?
And those guys are neck and neck, but kind of the third guy behind them, that's still open for anyone's taking, and it's going to be hard as a G5 quarterback to take that as far as like the national rankings go. But as far as the wave goes, I mean, you look at this schedule, the first 3 games are critical. South Alabama has the potential to be a trap game. Southern Miss is going to be a fun one. I think Ole Miss and Tulane are a lot closer in talent than people think, and the nation's going to find out a lot about these players in that game. But I mean, if you make it through those first 3 games and you are 3-0, this is a team that can run the table and be in the college football playoff, no doubt about it.
Before I go to Rene, I did want to ask you about the quarterback room, because they got as talented of a quarterback room as anybody in the nation.
Yeah, I wrote about that not long ago, and I was looking at quarterback room rankings, and Tulane was really nowhere to be found on a lot of toward the top. But I mean, I think the Houston game last year, you look at that, they were on their 3rd string quarterback, the Green Wave were, and then pulled off a victory in overtime against a team that was predicted to win the conference and potentially do more.
Right.
And so I think that Justin Ibieta, whenever he's healthy, Willie Fritz told me this has shown a lot of good things, and if he could just not be injured as often as he is, and we might really have something here. And both those guys, between Kai Horton and Justin Ibieta, bring all the raw traits to the table. Kai Horton has told me he views himself as kind of a Josh Allen. I'd say that, I mean, there's some developments if he had to reach that level, but I mean, as far as the description of the quarterback and who he is, I would say that you can make a comparison there. But yeah, both guys, strong arm, big frame, the traits and everything. So I think that they're really good quarterbacks that if Michael Pratt ever goes down, you can kind of trust in them to take care of it.
Why don't you piggyback on the quarterbacks at Tulane, because that is a really good room.
Yeah, and I'm going to say this too, some names to watch. Michael Penix at Washington is probably the best. And Bo Nix is Oregon. He's really, really good. Some come from Oregon, coming from Auburn. Ty Simpson at Alabama is a guy they like. I don't know if he'll be able to do it, but he's a quarterback that they really, really watching. Spencer Sanders, I know they got Jackson Dart right now at Ole Miss as a starter, but Spencer Sanders, he did not come from Oklahoma State to sit and watch and hold a clipboard. The quarterback room at Tulane, it's you know, you got Kai Horton played in one game, and Justin Ibieta's been hurt so much, it's really hard to get a read on either one of those guys over a period of time because they haven't played enough. So it's hard to project and say they can be college quarterbacks because, again, they haven't been in a situation where they've succeeded and failed and come back and that kind of thing. So neither one of them have done it enough to really get a good read on. Right. But Michael Pratt, he certainly can lift that team, and he's coming back with major. Boy, had he left, that would have been devastating. But as he comes back, he's a lot like Derek Carr in the way that he's got the respect of all his teammates, and he means so much to that team, not only from an offensive standpoint, as a group, offensively and defensively and everything else. I mean, he really lifts that team to a different level. You know,
a lot like LSU, Tulane, again, stacked wide receivers. They have a great room there. They have quality at the running back position, even though a lot of people, again, they're going to miss Spears, no doubt about it. They have quality there. Their offensive line, where again it's going to be a really good offensive line this year as well.
Sincere Haynesworth is the best in the conference, and you know, he's a little bit undersized, but man, he's played so much. Sincere Haynesworth that he means a lot to that team. Yeah. I wouldn't say he means as much as Michael Pratt, but it means if Sincere Haynesworth had to be replaced, that would be significant. You get Princeton Pines coming back at one of the guards. Cam Wyatt comes over. He didn't get a lot of reps at LSU, but he's going to solidify that left tackle position. Josh Rimicic is in there. Rashad Green, kid from Baton Rouge at right tackle, has done well. I don't think they got a playmaker. They got the Bowen kid at tight end, but Jaquan Jackson is a guy who can do it as special teams or as a wide receiver. Brazil is a guy who's got a lot of height, 6'5". Keith Brown comes in from Texas A&M. Dante Fleming come over from ULL. So they got some people who can get deep. And I think, you know, Lawrence Keys is a guy from McDonough 35. Yeah. And so he's got great speed, and he's
Watts
a guy
as well.
I'm sorry?
Watts.
Yeah, exactly, Watts. I'm sorry. So, you know, you got guys who can get deep and make the defense play honest, because they can get deep on you. And when the defensive secondary is looking for deep stuff, it opens a lot up underneath, and that's where a lot of running backs. I mean, the kid Arnold Barnes had a good spring from Booker T. Washington, Shotty Clayton. The kid Shedrill Lewis transfers in, and he's a guy that can give you that flash. You know, I don't think he's going to totally replace Tyjae Spears, but he can give you a big play ability that Tyjae Spears did. And Shedrill Lewis is a little guy, 5'10", 170, but he's really fast, and I think he's going to bring a lot to that room. But Celestine is a running back from the North Shore. They got a lot of quality depth there. They do. And they could play a lot of people at that position and very little drop-off.
Crissy, your thoughts on the Tulane offense, because I think they're loaded for bear. I think they got a lot of talent everywhere, and also, again, what really obviously protecting Pratt's going to be job one, and I think that offensive line is really good.
Yeah, Fritz and we talked about the depth that this team brings to the table on both sides of the ball. I mean, they're players that haven't been talked about as much by the national media. I mean, you talk about Nick Anderson and Dorian Williams stealing the show on the defensive side of the ball, and then some of the guys that have left on the offense as well. But I think that when we look at the Tulane offense, there's not a lot of spots to fill. I think that this is the best wide receivers room that Tulane has had. Really a lot of speed. Speed is what it comes down to. Dante Fleming's a very fast guy. I think that Jaquan Jackson, obviously the veteran there, is going to carry the bulk of the load whenever it comes to being a pass catcher. But Chris Brazzell, Michael Pratt told me that he thinks he can be something very special if he puts some more weight on. But I think across the offense, especially with Sincere Haynesworth coming back, that was huge. That's where it all starts from. I think that this is an offense that's pretty well put together and ready to put together some continuity from last year.
Defensively, they lost 2 really good linebackers, but Machado comes back to get Grubbs from Louisiana Tech. The defensive line looks stout, and the secondary, again, they got a Benerick Award watch winner in Monroe. Talk a bit about the defense.
Yeah, I think that Tyler Grubbs is going to be a player to watch. They asked him a little bit media availability a couple days ago, what's it like to kind of step in, but I think he's going to be his own player, and I think he's going to carry the load a little bit better than some people might anticipate. And then we talk about Jarius Monroe. I think that's going to be one of the most underrated secondary prospects in the nation when it comes to the NFL draft, and I think he's got the confidence to back it. I think that his Twitter header is something along the lines of, have you ever seen a cornerback win the Heisman before? He's a bigger corner, and he's talked to some veteran NFL guys who are bigger corners to try to adjust his technique. He said he spent a lot of time working on that this offseason. So player that plays with aggression is going to move you if he puts her hands on you. So, I mean, it's going to be really interesting to watch him.
Break that defense one down for us.
Getting Adonis Freeman back is big. Yeah. Very big. Man, what he does in the middle, and they didn't have anybody to match what he brought to the table. Patrick Jenkins coming in, a local guy. Keith Cooper on the outside. I mean, this is his time to step up. Tyler Grubbs had over 400 tackles at Holy Cross. I mean, he was crazy. And he led, in fact, his freshman year at Louisiana Tech. He's one of the top 3 tacklers in the country. Yeah. So he's really good. A guy to watch out for. I talked to him. A.J. Hampton comes over from Northwestern. And boy, the people don't know about him. You're going to find out real quick. He's a cornerback. He brings a lot to the table. He had good games against Ohio State, and you know, I can't think of the guys. What's the guy? I'm drawing a blank. The Ohio State receiver. Anyway, he's still there. Anyway, he kept him to 2 catches for 6 yards in a matchup last year. Right. Okay, Ohio State and Northwestern. A.J. Hampton's going to mean a lot to that. You know, they lose Macon Clark. They lose a lot of guys. That's going to hurt a lot. But you know, they had guys come in, and guys are going to be stepping up. This is an opportunity. Platt, from the linebacker. I just think this is an opportunity for guys to show what they can do. And Angelo Anderson, the defensive end from John Curtis, I think this will be a year for him to see what he can do.
Expectations for Tulane this year?
It's going to sound bold, but I think that Tulane's going to run the table. I think that it's going to be a tougher first 3 games than may meet the eye. I think that this is a team that, I mean, you look at the Southern Miss game last year, and you're trying to avoid a pitfall like that. But I mean, I cover Ole Miss for Saturday Down South. That's the job I forgot to mention earlier of like the 7 or 8 that I do. But Lane Kiffin said that this team didn't have a run defense within several miles of the stadium whenever it played Auburn. And they do have some defensive holes. And I think whenever we look at Jackson Dart still developing, you have Quinshon Judkins, who's really, really good. But I think that there are still some question marks for Ole Miss to hash out. And I think these 2 teams are very much on par with each other, and dare I say that Tulane may be the better one. But I think if you get past those first 3, and then you can end off against UTSA, and we see how much UTSA really reflects the hype at the end of the season. But I mean, it's not out of the picture for this team to go undefeated, and I think that they'll do it.
That's bold.
Talked to South Alabama coaches last week, and boy, they got the game circled. And I mean, this is a game where every team can say this, but you got all summer to analyze the opponent for the first game.
Right.
And they play stout defense. South Alabama plays really, really good defense, and that's Womack's. That's his deal. That game is going to be like a 2 or 3 point difference in that game. I can, you know, 20-17, 23-20, whatever it may be. That's going to be a close game. The Southern Miss game, I know they came in Tulane last year and won. And Hall is a guy who was familiar with Tulane, having been there for a while. And you know, they're going to have that game to be played in Hattiesburg. The Ole Miss game is going to be really significant to Kiffin because Lane is coming here. It's an SEC kind of game. It's early in the season, and it's a game that he knows they really, really need. It's not a game that you could kind of take for granted and say, well, it's an early season game, and maybe in the past it had been a Tulane game, or, you know, we'd win it. They're going to have to play hard, and Ole Miss is a kind of team that you don't know what you're going to get this year in the SEC. And Jackson Dart, again, is a guy who's starting, but Spencer Sanders is a guy that I think in time is going to take that position over. And the Ole Miss running back is the best in the SEC. But that's going to be the first 2 games. Tulane could be 2-0. They could be 1-1 or 0-2. I mean, that is, you don't know what you're going to get with those. With Ole Miss and South Alabama is going to be a serious challenge. Right. And if the South Alabama comes down to a big player too, that could weigh heavily on how they get into the Ole Miss game. I mean, emotionally and otherwise. If the first game against Tulane in South Alabama is tough, the second game against Ole Miss is going to make it that even tougher. But UTSA, Frank Harris, the quarterback, left-hander, is really, really good. He's the best, probably, mobile overall talent in the conference. I mean, as far as a mobile and a passer, he's really, really good. And that's going to be the final game of the season, and that's going to represent a lot.
Quick question for you before we get out of here. Southeastern Nichols, how they look this year?
Southeastern 9-4 last year. They could have been 11-2. Nichols is going to have, they were 3 wins last year, but they got some local guys. Tyler Morton from Destran, defensive back. Perry Gansey from Jesuit, 3-time state wrestling champion. He had 4 sacks last year. He's a defensive lineman. And I'm trying to think who else. Keelan White, it was a linebacker from John Curtis. So those 3 guys are going to play a major role in Tim Rebowe. Nichols, 3 games last year. They can reverse that. And Tim Rebowe does a great job coaching, so I look for Nichols to have a good season. And Frank Salfo has picked to win the Southland Conference. 9 wins last year. He's hoping to go at least 11 or 12.
How you see this thing playing out with, again, the Final Four this year, just again from a preseason standpoint?
Yeah, I think it kind of comes down to a lot of the things that he said. I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see how things shake out here.
Right. Again, well, Georgia probably the best team in the nation right now.
Yes.
Right. Again, Alabama going to be there. Ohio State.
Ohio State for sure.
Ohio State again. Any other? I mean, LSU's a sleeper there. Anybody else out there that?
I mean, you know. Could
Anybody
Oregon,
from out west?
I mean, could Oregon, USC, could Oregon, you know, I mean, come up with Bo Nix? Who knows? Could North Carolina with Drake May? You know, crazy things happen. You don't know. But those teams, USC, Ohio State, Georgia, and the quarterback situation, you don't know how it's going to be with Georgia. But LSU certainly, the Jordan Travis, Jaden Daniels matchup, Florida State and LSU, those 2 right now are really, really high up in the Heisman. And whoever wins that game is going to, early in the season, Jaden Daniels or Jordan Travis, they are very, very close, similar in quarterback styles. Will get a step up in the competition. But Jordan Travis, I don't want LSU people sleep on him. He is really good at Florida State. He's broken a lot of records, passing records and rushing records at Florida State, and he'll be the total package.
And the hype for Jaden Daniels for Heisman is real.
I honestly don't see it that way. I think that whenever it comes down to it at the end of the season, that he'll be overtaken by another quarterback.
Caleb Williams, maybe something?
Oh, yeah. Caleb Williams is definitely my favorite to win the Heisman this year.
Same here?
Well, I mean, I think Jaden Daniels is going to be, right now, he's in the top 4 or 5. And I mean, and Jordan Travis, they're right up there with him. So right now you got prospects, you got suspects, you know, but I think Jaden Daniels depends how the team does. If they win the Florida State game convincingly, that's going to help them a lot.
I think that fans are optimistic right now. Again, with Saints, Tulane, LSU, this could be a really good season. Southeastern, as you mentioned, this could be a really good football season down here in South Louisiana.
Yeah, I think so. I think that if the Saints kind of, like I said, playoffs or bust, if they hit what their goal is, and it's going to be an exciting team to watch. Tulane with the potential to build upon last year and go undefeated and be even better than it was last year. And then with LSU, like I said, that there's still a lot to figure out, but I think that LSU, when you look at the rivalry with Alabama is as shaky as I've ever seen it. Granted that I'm only 24 years old, but I think that that we've seen the beginning of the downfall for Alabama, and I think that LSU could sit firmly atop for years to come, depending on how this goes.
To be 24 again, right?
I can't remember that. I can't remember that.
Crissy, Rene, thanks so much for being with us today here on Inside New Orleans
Thank
Sports.
you.
All right, thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, plenty of ways to catch our program. Now there's a QR code coming up on your screen that'll take you either to my website, ericasher.com, or the WLAE-TV YouTube page. You set your DVR for your favorite time slot, and you'll never miss Inside New Orleans Sports. Catch me on the radio, 106.1 FM Nash Icon. That is 4 to 6 weekdays. You can listen live at ericasher.com, the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app, or also our digital platforms. We're also on Anchor, Spotify, that you can catch our podcast there. Also, again, don't forget about our sponsors that make this this program possible. All of our underwriters, please support our underwriters. And then, of course, we thank the production staff here at WLAE-TV, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Logan Graffia, also Danielle Wick. William Hill is out today, so we've got Alex Chacon directing the the program. I'm Eric Asher for Crissy, Froyd, and Rene Nadeau. Have a great week. We'll see you back here next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thank you.